Hi everyone, Rick Russell here. Stand by for channel markers.
I rather like the battleship Zen Garden here.
On this channel, any list of our favorite warships usually starts with a battleship. When we consider our favorite carriers, as Jack and Ryan did recently, the unique set of the U.S. Navy's pre-World War II carriers are well represented. The Big E is an obvious choice. Her 20 battle stars earned in the Pacific are difficult to top. But apart from Enterprise, which is next? Personally, I'd choose the old Lexington. Her loss at Coral Sea, veterans said, was like losing a member of the family. But how does the good ship Ranger fare? Like Lexington, she earned 2 battle stars during the war. Judging from comments we've received, some viewers believe she is underappreciated, and they might be right. So today, we remember the U.S. Navy's first purpose-built aircraft carrier and 4th flat top overall, USS Ranger, CV-4. Congress authorized Ranger on February 13, 1929. Experiments conducted on board the first 3 carriers became key factors when designing Ranger. For example, we often forget that, although she was much smaller than the converted battlecruisers Lexington and Saratoga, she had a much larger hangar. Workers at Newport News Shipbuilding and Drydock Company laid her keel in 1931 and launched the carrier in 1933. She was commissioned on the 4th of July in 1934. Franklin D. Roosevelt was president, and he wasn't a fan of the ship. Years later, he would tell Winston Churchill she was best used as an aircraft ferry. Ranger was the only pre-war carrier that didn't serve in the Pacific War. Her defects were well known. She was the slowest of the 7 pre-war carriers and had no underwater protection. Pre-war exercises showed she couldn't ride the deep swells of the Pacific Ocean as comfortably as the large carriers, which limited air operations. Also, designed at a time when the concept of dive bombing was ascendant, she entered the fleet without stowage space for torpedoes. Ranger was at sea when the crew received word of the attack on Pearl Harbor. For most of 1942, she operated around Norfolk, in the South Atlantic, and ferried aircraft for the Army to Africa. But life on board the carrier soon took an exciting turn.
Soldiers and sailors, all resistance, by whomever offered, must be destroyed.
November the 8th, 1942. Orders of the day. The words "play ball," transmitted by the task force commanders, signifies that all forces are to take vigorous and offensive action against the enemy. Play ball. Fight was on at Casablanca.
Ranger's claim to fame rests on 2 operations. Ironically, after Roosevelt insisted the U.S. Army get skin in the game by invading French North Africa, as the only large U.S. carrier in the Atlantic, Ranger stopped ferrying aircraft and became the centerpiece of the air component for Operation Torch, which commenced on November 8, 1942. On the 10th, she avoided 4 torpedoes fired by the French submarine Tonnant. All passed under Ranger's stern. In 3 days, Ranger launched 496 combat sorties. Her aircraft scored 2 direct bomb hits on a French destroyer leader, attacked a French light cruiser, dropped depth charges on 2 submarines, and destroyed coastal defenses and anti-aircraft batteries. They shot down 15 French aircraft in aerial combat and destroyed another 70 enemy planes on the ground. They wreaked havoc with French light tanks and troop-carrying trucks. 16 planes from Ranger were lost or damaged beyond repair. Casablanca surrendered to U.S. forces on November 11th, and Ranger left for Norfolk the next day. What's significant is that Ranger demonstrated that carrier air power could play a formidable power projection role during future amphibious landings, especially in the Pacific, where to date the carriers had been necessarily involved in a battle for sea control with Japanese carriers. In 1943, after an overhaul and a return to Casablanca to deliver 75 P-40s for the Army, Ranger trained new pilots until she joined the British Home Fleet at Scapa Flow in August. On On October 2nd, she exited Scapa Flow on Operation Leader, a shipping strike on Bodo, Norway, her last combat sortie of the war. With much of the Luftwaffe transferred to Italy, Ranger executed a textbook raid on German and collaborator shipping. In the only carrier operation executed above the Arctic Circle during the war, Ranger's aircraft interdicted 2 convoys, sinking 5 ships and damaging several others. Wildcats on combat air patrol shot down the only 2 German aircraft that approached the task force. By December 1943, Ranger was obsolescent and badly overweight from numerous modifications and the addition of anti-aircraft guns. The next month, she was designated a training carrier, although she continued to serve on the ferry run between the U.S. and Casablanca. Admiral King was inclined to modernize Ranger, but her top speed would never exceed 28 knots, which was too slow for a modern carrier task force. And in the competition for steel and construction materials, the Essex-class carriers always won. She entered the Pacific as a training carrier in 1944, carried troops home in 1945, was decommissioned in 1946, and scrapped in 1947. Chaplain Joseph T. O'Callahan, who received the Medal of Honor for doing God's work on board Franklin during that carrier's terrible ordeal in 1945, served in Ranger during 1942 to 1944. He later wrote, "Now the Ranger has long since been decommissioned and sold for scrap, and the public does not know about the lonesome vacuum in the hearts of those who were her crew." Yet in a sense, the Ranger participated in the glories of the newer carriers. I believe that every first-line carrier built during the war received a large complement of Ranger-trained men. If the new ships had the old carrier spirit, this was derived at least in part from her simple greatness. That's all for this channel marker. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment or recommend another subject below. As always, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video.